Great to see everybody here. I'd like to welcome everybody. Please be seated if you're standing. I'd like to welcome everybody to another class of the Peaceful Solution Character Education Program Teacher Certification course. Great to see everybody here in the in the auditorium at this time. Excuse me. And for all of you online there too, we appreciate you tuning in. For whatever reason you might be doing it. Maybe you're required to take classes, or you're doing it strictly voluntary. Whichever the case, you will get a benefit out of it, even if you don't realize it right away. The words will come back to you in the time of need. So we're starting off now in the respect unit. We've been in the respect unit a while, and we're finishing up with chapter 5. This is the chapter that we call, the bullying chapter a lot of times, but it's actually responding to disrespect. I think Chris touched on that too recently. And one of the things that we found too is that it doesn't matter who you are and how long you've been studying the Peaceful Solution. In fact, along the way there's always room to grow, always room to overcome. And so that's what we try to do. That's what we strive to do in teaching and in being a student of the Peaceful Solution. We want to be the example to others. Many times we're not, and we try to get past those things and apologize for the things we've done that are less than perfect. In fact, a few of the teachers over the past few classes, several classes, have kind of alluded to some of those things, and we'll briefly talk about those. But we all need work. It doesn't stop just because you started studying the Peaceful Solution, or even if you've been doing it for 20 years. It's an ongoing process. It is a way of life. I mean, you can use this in every aspect of your life. So, all right, well, let's get started here. And we are in chapter 5, and let's just go ahead and go to the very beginning of chapter 5. And it's a note to the teacher. I'm going to read a little bit of this just to remind us, because we are teachers. This is the teacher certification course. And so this is something for us to remember. As we bring this chapter to a close, we're going to go back and look at the very beginning, touch base in a few key areas in between, some of the things that we want to make sure that we have learned, and go from there. So, Lesson Plan 5, page A. Lesson Plan 5, page A, Chapter 5, Responding to Disrespect, and this is the note to the teacher. Now, this unit would be incomplete if it didn't include a chapter on how to respond to disrespectful behavior of others. And this has always been a thing that we've needed, something that throughout life we need to learn how to do this, but there weren't a lot of people teaching us exactly how to do it. A lot of times, which the other teachers have already mentioned, but a lot of times the answer to the problem was, well, if you get bullied by somebody, you better take care of the situation, hit them in the head with something, because when you get home, you're going to get it if you didn't. So you're actually adding fire to fire, and that doesn't help anything. But there's no doubt that we live in a society that condones all forms of disrespect, and none of us are immune to it. Despite the best efforts to consistently treat others with care and concern, some will respond to respect with disrespect. Therefore, an integral part of building a positive moral character is ensuring that children and adults alike, we're children in learning the right way, are taught how to handle disrespect from others in the most peaceful manner possible. And there's all types of ways to do this, and all the teachers have touched base on all these different ways and different ideas on how to do things, and some of the things that you might have to do depending upon the situation. I know one time myself when I was caught totally off guard. I guess I could say I was caught off guard. It was totally unexpected that somebody came to me and just started in on me, and I was so appalled by it, and it was so what seemed like out of character for this person to come, and it was involved some accusations and so forth, and there was a high degree of I guess you'd say honor for the person, and they came out of nowhere and just started in, and I was like so shocked I couldn't even talk. So there wasn't any like fighting back or retaliating or anything like that. It was just I was so shocked I couldn't even talk. I mean it just floored me, and I went away from that still just so, you know, not knowing what just occurred, and it took me a long time to process it and be able to even say anything to the person because it was just so far out there. And you know, possibly what he was saying was true, but at the time it just came out of nowhere, and so, you know, in that way at least I kept my mouth shut and didn't make things worse. You know what I mean? And so sometimes it might come to you in that manner, and you have to be able to. The main thing that you want to do is not to make it worse. Being silent would rarely make it worse, I think, but opening your mouth, you sure could very easily make it worse. But people today have been influenced to think that the problem of disrespect can be solved with more disrespect. The you hit me, I'll hit you back mentality has really become the norm. It's very obvious if you see any kind of, you can't avoid ads these days, even on the internet news. When you're looking at something, there's ads that will come your way depending upon what channel you're on and so forth. But you know, you can see that mentality is that disrespect is indeed the norm. And so then responding to disrespect is something that we just haven't learned the proper way to do this. So this way of thinking has become ingrained in the minds of our children and of us, the older side of it, you know. All our lives it was taught to us. And it's resulted in a rash of school shootings and other acts of violence that are plaguing our nation today. Even with the governments, the leaders of the world, it's so easy for someone to do something that makes another leader mad and makes the people mad, and then they go and turn around and want to go ahead and get back at them. I think not long ago it was talked about the video, the video that was made called Tit for Tat, and it showed a couple stick figures. It showed one starting out bumping into somebody, and the other guy saying, "Hey, I'm sorry," but that wasn't great enough. The person said, "Oh, you're sorry? I bet you're sorry." And you know, it just went from one thing to another. He got a rock in through it, then it was a bigger rock, and then it was a knife, and then it was a sword, and then it was a bullet, and then it was a bomb, and then finally the nuclear bomb, right? And last week, or week before last week, William had shown a video that was made down in Laredo, and it involved Peaceful Solutions students that were in that video, that all volunteered for that particular video. And so that was talking about bullying and the way it progresses. And so anybody who's ever been bullied in school, which I bet 99% of the people here have or have been the bully, could see in that one video how real that was, you know, because that's how it goes. Now, it might not have turned right away into someone pulling out a gun and shooting someone and themselves, but it does often turn out that way in this day and time. So getting even is like the root of the problems of verbal and physical abuse, murder and suicide and so forth. And through character education, this is the thing we have to remember, through character education, that's the thing we're doing right now, and that you're striving to be a teacher of, in that we can take this all to everybody. That's the thing, character education, proper moral character education. Topics covered in this particular chapter are self-control and humility, the role it plays in responding to disrespect, and how to deal effectively with our emotions. That's such a key thing, and we've harped on it in many different classes because we've learned how important it is to be able to control our emotions. And even William had a personal story, in fact, that he shared with us before of of how someone can come to you when you're really in a down spot there and your emotions are really out of whack. Someone can remind you, hey, snap out of it. You can do this, and go wash your face off and call me back. And you do it, and you realize that you should not make your decisions based upon emotions. Everybody's got emotions. This would be a very drab world if we didn't have emotions. Just think if you could never be glad or sad or the multitude of different emotions out there that we experience from day to day, it would be very boring without it. So we also learn how to use some I messages like, I don't understand what you're saying, rather than, you're not explaining yourself to me. It makes it just a little more palatable for the person that you're dealing with. And always remember, and of course this talks about just responding to disrespect from the opposite sex and how to handle correction for unintentional disrespect where you didn't even know you did anything, but someone brought it to your attention. But also to remember that responding to a bully, some severe disrespect coming your way, it never does help for you to lose control and start yelling back, because there's no calmness and no peace that's going to take place in that in any possible way. And so that's some of the lessons that we learn along the way. On the last page, on lesson page 5, page B, lesson plan 5, page B, as educators and role models, we are in a unique position to change the course of our children's lives, and by teaching them moral and peaceful ways to handle disrespect, we can enable them to preserve the integrity of their character and their lives, and that goes from us too. And, influence from the teacher is such a huge thing. In fact, this is at the beginning. I encourage you to check it out. In the preface of the book on page 13, XIII, there, influence from the teacher, the author goes into talking about how he remembers how he was influenced at a young age, and then his father's influence upon him, how if he would have said, get even instead of, get back at him instead of teaching him a more peaceful way. He doesn't, he's so thankful that he had teachers that were able to teach him the right way as he was growing up. So moving on here, we want to, that's a reminder for us, the teacher, actually. And I wanted to make a point of something too. So I'm going to kind of break away from this for a minute. The point is that there are 4 types of disrespect. If you can't name those 4 types right now off the top of your head, you need to look at this and remember this, because there are 4 types. And you might be thinking, 4 types? How in the world do you get that? I mean, disrespect is disrespect, right? But interestingly enough, you have intentional disrespect and unintentional disrespect, which go along with real disrespect. Then there's also imagined. So let's go back there for just a minute and look at it. So you have real disrespect, that's number 1. Real disrespect, say it in your mind or get it in your head. Real disrespect, it really did occur, it took place, there's no question about it, it's real, okay? Then you have to look at that real disrespect and say, was it intentional or unintentional? Because even though it might have been unintentional, it's still real disrespect. Now there are some people out there that intentionally will disrespect you. That's a whole other ballgame, and you're dealing with a rough character right there, okay? I would say that the majority of the disrespect that takes place amongst students of the Peaceful Solution and those wanting to be teachers is probably unintentional disrespect. We just haven't got past this certain point yet, and we do something that we really didn't mean to do. It's unintentional, but it is real. So I'm going to say it again. Real disrespect. And that real disrespect can be either intentional or unintentional. Got it? So it's like a 1 real with an A-B underneath it. 1, real disrespect. A, intentional. B, unintentional. You got it? Now this other disrespect, so that's 3 of the types right there. So this other disrespect is imagined disrespect. It's not disrespect. It's imagined. So we call it a type of disrespect because it is imagined, and in the person's mind that's imagining it, to them, it's real, right? Think about it for a minute. Do you see where I'm coming from on this? You're imagining someone disrespected you by something they said that didn't even concern you probably, but you picked it up and jumped to some kind of conclusion. It's imaginary disrespect. It wasn't real. They did not disrespect you, but in your mind it has occurred. Okay, that's another form. Think about it. Jumping to a conclusion, you can absolutely create imagined disrespect. So we have real and imagined, and for the real disrespect, you've got intentional and unintentional, right? Okay? That's something to remember, the 4 disrespects. That's really something to keep in mind. And, you know, if you wanted to read into it a little bit more, like the jumping to conclusion, you could go to the self-control book, page 62. You can write that down for your notes in self-control, and you can read about jumping to conclusions too. And then also, one of the ways to help keep that from occurring would be proper communication. When you're communicating properly with people, you know, both sides, you got to have someone that's giving and someone that's taking, someone that's talking, someone that's listening, you know, and it's a sharing situation. But on page 92 and 93 in your self-control book is also about communication, okay? All right, so now let's go ahead and get to this particular lesson. So Catan last week covered a couple pages, or last class covered a couple pages, as well as William prior to that. It was all dealing with responding to disrespect from the opposite sex, food for thought, the clothes that you wear, disrespecting yourself and not respecting yourself and so forth, when the shoe's on the other foot. We've covered all these things. And it's like Catan had mentioned that, like we kind of mentioned before, when you're in the middle of something, you have some type of conflict, well, yelling at the other person, which I believe it was right here in the, on page 143, when the shoe's on the other foot, you know, be patient. These are the ways that you can be patient to communicate and respond properly. Be patient, remain calm and respectful, listen attentively, and be humble and apologize, not yell back at them, you know. And he gave us a little example of that, you know, and he likes doing those things. So, and we all like to keep it kind of fun. So, let's look at bullet point number 1, or check mark number 1. I can respond respectfully to the disrespectful behavior of others. I can respond respectfully to the disrespectful behavior of others. So we're making an affirmation there, and we can do this thing. It's not something that cannot be achieved. But turn over to page 116, if you will. And, excuse me. This is one of the things to know, that disrespect hurts. And remember, even that imagined disrespect, because you're convinced someone disrespected you, you're imagining, you jump into a conclusion. It hurts. You know, it's something you're creating yourself, but it hurts still. So it is one thing to know that people can be disrespectful to each other, but it's quite a different experience when it occurs to us personally. Yeah. Well, without the determination to make positive choices and deal with disrespectful situations appropriately, it can be very easy to respond disrespectfully in turn. And, Chris gave us an example of when he was a teenager. He was like 16 and he knew everything. I mean, he knew more than his teachers. He knew more than his parents. He knew it all. But then something occurred in his life, and I think it was a fire or something that took place, and someone asked him if they had renter's insurance, and he was like, renter's insurance? What's that? boom, he just realized he wasn't the smartest person in the world anymore because he didn't even know anything about it, you know. So he gave us an example of how he, you know, in thinking that he knew everything or was smarter than everybody else, you know, along the way there was disrespect that took place and so forth. And he wasn't meaning to. It's just that that's the vision that he had of himself, and that's kind of where it led to. And then I was kind of laughing at this earlier. You know, William, a couple weeks ago, or was it last week? Might have been last week. But William talked about the word domineering, and he mentioned a certain incident that took place, and it's kind of funny in a way. But you know, we had been, me and William, we had been all around teaching the peaceful solution. Had recently just gotten back from Alaska back in 2008, and then this particular thing he was talking about that took place was in 2009. And the reason I'm saying something about it is that it was definitely a learning experience for me, and I think it was for him too, which he alluded to. And I know that when I would be, which he rightfully said, you know, I was anxious and upset and so forth, and I remember that. I look back on it and I remember it. It was actually a pretty fond time of creating that. It was very hard to do, but we created a video that took us really over 30 days actually to get it right, and it was a 1-hour video, which many of you have seen. What it did was it showed the advancement and the success that students of the Peaceful Solution were having by using it. We had several teachers and so forth that gave a certain testimony about it too. It was really great. But I do remember, like right here when I just read this, without the determination to make positive choices, and believe me, you know, that was, man, 14 years ago. I mean, I was definitely not perfect, and I'm not perfect now. But I did have something in my mind. I did have the determination to make a positive choice and deal with this particular situation that I didn't like too much, you know. And he mentioned that I did tell him about it, but in the right way. But I had a lot of advice on it too. I would call my friend Michael, and Michael helped me through a lot of times when, and not just with William. I mean, me and William were very close and dealt with that. You know, we'd get through that thing. But through all situations that came along, he would remind me of having that resolve and that determination, and to respond in the proper way, and not you know. He would always remind me, you know, have you thought about what kind of day the person's having? You know, what's going on in their life and so forth. All the things that we've been learning about. He would remind me of these things, and then it helped me to make the right choice. And in dealing with a job that I had at the time and so forth too. It was really, really very great. But we are all susceptible, all of us are susceptible to doing things that we don't even realize that we might be doing, that might be hurting somebody else in some manner, might be making them very anxious and so forth. And that's all of us. And I was reminded myself, I'll go ahead and throw one in there too. I was reminded myself very recently, after a Peaceful Solution class, someone in my family said, you know, it would be great if we started implementing that around here. You know, I was like, okay, yes, you're right. And so, as much as you try, you're gonna make mistakes, but you gotta leave yourself room to grow, and you got to be able to accept that correction in whatever way it comes. And I thought that was a very respectful way for it to be done. And so I thought about these things tonight before getting up here, and thought, you know, all of us fall into that sometimes. But that's why we do leave ourselves room to grow, and we just go back and we hit it again, and we realize, you know what? I haven't been implementing this as well as I should have. You know, let me work on this thing, you know, and you focus on that one thing. Well, so anyway, Without the determination to make the positive choices and deal with disrespectful situations appropriately, it can be very easy to respond disrespectfully in return. And this is the trap of disrespect, and many people fall into it. And we're going to mention the trap of disrespect again in just a moment. But some think that they will be seen as cowardly and weak if they don't retaliate, that they're going to get picked on from that point. But the truth is, it takes a lot more courage and moral determination, or it takes courage and moral determination to treat others with consideration, even though they might be being unkind to you, or what you consider to be unkind. You know, it's not the same on everybody's chart. What I might think is unkind when someone's dealing with me, another person might think, oh, you know, nothing to it, man. You know, so... All right. Well, one of the hardest things we'll ever have to do is dealing respectfully, responding respectfully to disrespect. It is hard. Man, it can just make your whole body shake, you know. It is hard to do, but it gets better, and you're more able to do it as time goes on. So remember that. Okay, let's move on. Back to page 144 on what I've learned. Number 2 there, I can avoid the trap of disrespect. See, I told you, the trap of disrespect. If I use self-control and do not retaliate or bear a grudge. Now, on page 127, look down at the bottom. Well, maintaining control, it talks about remaining calm, using a respectful tone of voice, be polite, always try to find a peaceful solution. And then at the bottom it talks about don't hold a grudge or hold on to unkind thoughts about the person. That doesn't help. Even if you make it through responding to the person properly, if you hold on to some kind of grudge, that is not going to help you. It could be even worse because you're not dealing with the situation. It just sits there and grows and festers inside you. Remember, you know, holding a grudge against somebody else is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. Remember that one? And then on page 119, you can write these down. Page 119, you really have to be prepared. Preparation, it requires self-control. And you must control your thoughts, feelings, and actions. Self-control plays an important role in learning how to respond to this disrespectful behavior. And when you consistently use self-control, you can avoid acting impulsively and avoid the trap of disrespect. It's that impulsive action that leads you to blurt out, and you haven't really prepared, you haven't set your mind in advance, you haven't practiced enough, the pressure's on, and blurp, there it comes. You just yelled at them and responded disrespectfully. And I said yelled at him. You could have done a number of different things, but a lack of self-control is the cause of much of the disrespectful behavior that exists today. And if you respond to disrespect without self-control, it's going to be like fighting fire with fire. The fire just won't go out. Now, I know, again, there's someone that's going to say, no, you can fight fire with fire, you know, doing a backfire around creating a perimeter, you know, so the fire burns out. Yeah, okay, well, that's one way to do it, you know, but we're not talking about that here. Get real. We're talking about you opening your mouth and blurting out something disrespectful to someone who disrespected you. Fire with fire. And if you see a fire there and you pull out a match and throw it at it, try to put the fire out, it ain't going out. Or if you pull out, if you see a fire and you dump over some hot coals that are flaming and burning, or dump over a burning trash can or something like that, it's not going to help. It's not going to put the fire out, okay? But the first step in practicing this self-control is to become aware of your thoughts, because your thoughts affect your feelings, and your feelings can lead to actions. You gotta remember that. Get those thoughts in line. It keeps the feelings, the emotions at bay, you know. Get those thoughts under control. Smooth thoughts, calm thoughts, cool thoughts, you know. Don't just feed that fire. Don't say, that idiot, what do they think they're doing to me? You know, don't go that route. Look at it another way. And then, page 116. Oh, we already read some of that on the previous page, so we won't go there, but it talks about that trap of disrespect too. All right, number 3, it takes moral strength and courage to respond appropriately when I am being antagonized and provoked. So it's a little reminder for you. It takes moral strength and courage to respond appropriately when you're being antagonized and provoked. So over on page 118, and of course there's been much said about all of these in all the lessons that you've been hearing and being a part of. So this is just hitting some high points in the book so you can make some notes and know, hey, I can go back here on this one. A lot of you have this downloaded on your computer so you can actually search different terms and words. Chris mentioned that quite a bit the other day, or a couple weeks ago, I guess. But you can look up the certain keywords, and it takes you to certain places where you can find it quickly. But for those of you that don't have a computer or don't know how to download that and everything, you can write down some page numbers or something like that. So page 118. And what we're talking about is it does take this moral strength and courage to respond appropriately. And so being prepared, you mean I should be prepared to be shown disrespect? Yes, you should. And not everybody at this time is trying to develop a positive moral character. Many people couldn't care less. They're only interested in watching TV and going to sporting events or whatever the multitude of things are that can take their time away. They're just not even concerned, and they might even think that morally they are sound, when in reality they don't have a clue. Just like we didn't have a clue before we started learning the peaceful solution, right? Okay. So on down it says you should definitely be prepared to deal with disrespectful behavior in whatever form it might come. And it says, does that mean you should walk around expecting people to disrespect you, like with a chip on your shoulder or something? No. It just means being prepared by setting your mind in advance and working hard and practicing. And that's the key thing, is practicing this. Because when you practice, what occurs? With anything you practice, you get better at it. So with anything you practice, you're able to pull out the right tool in a crunch when the pressure's on. If you're a mechanic, you don't pull every tool out and throw it at the vehicle you're working on and then start digging through it. You have a toolbox and you go pull out the right tool. If it's the wrong one, go get another one, But eventually you'll get the right tool and go for it. And it's the same thing with anything. If you were a golfer or something, you're not just going to go out there and win the whatever the big Australian Open is or whatever. You're not going to go just step out there and do that. You have to practice. You got to fail a lot. You got to win a lot, and you got to practice. And when the crunch comes, you're there. In fact, most sports figures that have received a certain notoriety, I should say, will tell you that practice is the key, and all of them will tell you that they've missed the ball more than they've hit the ball. When it comes to like baseball and golf and so forth, they've made more mistakes than they have successes, more failures than successes. So anyway, it's about practice, and that's what we do too, is practice. So when the pressure comes, the heat's on, someone says something to you that you don't like, boom, you answer the right way. You handle it. You're calm. You're Joe Cool, you got this. So, I didn't mean to put that in your mind, the Joe Cool thing, but being prepared, setting your mind in advance, and you've got to decide that regardless of how someone pushes your buttons, you will never purposely try to retaliate by becoming verbally or physically abusive. You notice it says purposely. You might do it accidentally, but you can always apologize and come back and be ready for next time. It just means you need more practice. And that's the thing. It just means we need more practice. If we're failing at some things, we need more practice at doing the right thing. So it talks about being tempted to react impulsively. An impulsive action is one that's done without careful thought or consideration. Anyway, two wrongs never make a right, and so be prepared. Setting your mind in advance, a lot of times we back up there to the character unit, page 80, the character unit. You can You can look at that, put it in your notes there. It's something great to go to and remember at all times. That's one of the key things that we always, all the teachers, revert back to, is setting our mind in advance. So that's one page right there that you'd want to have ingrained in your mind. Then I would say also page number 88, room to grow, in the character unit also. I would say that one is one also that you would have. There's so many of them that you need ingrained in your mind that you can just go back to it in your mind, or if you need to, in the book, and over a period of time it will get ingrained in your mind. Okay, we better move on here. Okay, the next checkpoint is I must be prepared to deal with disrespect in whatever form it might come. And of course, that's part of what we just covered right there. And this goes back to talking about the 4 types of disrespect. And so we're going to go over that one more time, because if anything that I would like to be really ingrained tonight when you leave here is you, as a teacher of the Peaceful Solution, getting this in your mind on these 4 different types of disrespect it's so important. They're not all the same. They're so different. And so we're going to go back to that for a minute, and that's on page 117. So on page 117, and I mentioned already the self-control and communication and everything there, but if you look down at the bottom, as you can see, disrespect can be real or imagined, intentional or unintentional. And with so many ways that disrespect can occur, so this is one of the forms, in whatever form it might come to you in, this is one of the forms of disrespect. This will help you deal with each situation appropriately. And a person, here's the key, a person with a positive moral character, a person with a positive attitude. Remember, we've talked about this a lot in the past classes, where attitude is key. It's the attitude that you have. It's the attitude that you exhibit. It's the attitude that you experience every day. If you're practicing self-control, if you're practicing acceptance of your neighbor, if you're practicing, truly caring for others, respect, care and concern for others, if you're practicing true moral character, and that foundation, if you are practicing these things, you will have a more positive mental attitude towards others. You probably won't be walking around with a frown on your face all the time. Maybe you have something to frown about. Remember, emotions, sometimes you're going to frown, sometimes you're going to be sad, sometimes you're going to be a little angry, just don't get carried away. And sometimes you're going to be very glad and joyful and so forth. Excited, you're going to have these things. But the more positive moral character that you can build within you and that you practice, the more it's going to show on your face and in your actions, which is a result from having a positive mental moral attitude. And that's important. Attitude, man, is everything. I remember in sales, we trained a lot of salespeople, hundreds, if not thousands, over the last 20, 30 years. But one of the key things was attitude, was to have the right attitude when you go to see a customer or you pick up the phone. There's little sayings like smile before you dial. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Even though that's something that's used, in workplace and everything, there's nothing wrong with that. That matches up perfectly with the Peaceful Solution. If you're fixing to call and complain about your phone bill, it'd be better for you if you smile before you dial, right? Get that positive mental attitude going. And then you can respond to whatever comes your way. I've always found that to be one of the tougher ones to deal with. So it's not for everybody, but it is for some. So attitude is everything. If you're in car sales, if your mind is on the excuse me, the almighty dollar, if that's where your mind is at, then you go out to see a customer or you talk to a customer on the phone, guess what? It's going to show through. You might as well just be saying to the person, hey, I want your money. I want all the money in your pocket. That's because that's what's going to come through. But on the other hand, if you take the attitude of your job being to help someone fill a need, to help someone feel their transportation needs, something that fits their budget, something that fits, what they're going to use it for, and so forth, then you're going to be more of a servant type attitude, a helpful attitude, and that's a positive moral attitude. Excuse me. That's a little better. Okay. So positive attitude. And then the next point is negative peer pressure is a form of disrespect. Negative peer pressure. Let's go to page 130. And what we're doing again in all the books, you can find all kinds of stuff about peer pressure in all the Peaceful Solution books, but we're focusing a little bit more on this chapter and what we've covered here. So page 130 is, let's take a closer look at friends. And this is so important because your friends, they hold a lot of weight, don't they? They hold a lot of weight on what you get involved in, on the slang you use, if you use slang, the way you talk, even your accent, the way you dress, the way you talk to people, and so forth. So friends, like family, play an important role in our lives, and friends help to make our lives richer and give us a sense of belonging and acceptance. However, friends can also be disrespectful and influence each other to make negative choices. Chris touched on, of course, bullying is when you're, and it can be done mentally or physically or whatever, a type of force when you're trying to get somebody to do something that they might not want to do. Now, if somebody, I think he gave the example of a family member mentioning to the other family member that they need to brush their teeth. Mom or dad telling the child, you need to brush your teeth. You haven't brushed your teeth all today. You need to brush your teeth before you go to bed. And the child saying, oh, you're bullying me. Well, no, that's not bullying. That's, even if the parent brought some type of consequence towards them and said, look, if you don't brush your teeth, you're not going to be able to do this. You need to get in the habit of brushing your teeth. And if they started screaming they're being bullied, no, they're not being bullied. And so there are times when someone might think, because of their twisted thought pattern, that bullying, that they might think something's bullying and it's not bullying. And on the other hand, somebody could also think something's not bullying, but it turns out it is bullying too. So there's a lot of discernment that needs to take place there, and it comes with practicing the Peaceful Solution and practicing respect. Anyway, friends have the ability to exert both positive and negative influences on each other. Positive influence encourage. It helps a person to have courage to do something. Moral, respectful behavior towards oneself and others. Negative influences, on the other hand, promote risk-taking behavior. This is discouraging them. That's taking the courage to do the right thing away from them. Negative influences, on the other hand, promote risk-taking behavior such as engaging in premarital sex, abusing alcohol, and drugs. And to this list, you can also add smoking, disrespecting authority, being dishonest. And when peers influence each other negatively, it is called negative peer pressure. When peers influence each other negatively, it's called negative peer pressure. And the bottom line is, if friends try to pressure you into doing something that's wrong, and you could risk your health, well-being, and self-respect, then they are showing disrespect to you. For example, your friend says, I've got some marijuana to smoke, or, whatever the case might be. Someone who's a true friend would never try to encourage you to do something that's illegal and could damage your health. And, it's totally against everything the Peaceful Solution teaches. And another way in which friends can show disrespect to you is by not accepting your decision. So it's a decision that isn't, like life-changing, okay? You want the green cup, and or you like the green cup, they like the blue cup, and you can only buy a pack of one. You can't buy 2 packs, and you got to come to a decision with each other on it somehow, or work out something different, or get a tiebreaker or something. But if you try to force somebody to accept your decision, even on something that doesn't matter that much, you are bullying. You're showing disrespect if you're trying to get someone, forcing them to, whether it's physical force or mental force in some manner. When friends try to talk you into making a negative choice and tease or make fun of you, even if after you firmly said no, they are not showing respect to you or accepting your ability to make choices. True friends will accept your decision even when it's different from theirs. So if you come and ask to borrow my car and I say no, it's not going to help to keep trying to find every way to talk me into doing it, and even threatening me or telling me what a jerk I am because I won't let you borrow my car. All these different things you're going to try to make me get you to or let you borrow my car. No, the true friend is not going to do that. They're going to say, okay, well, maybe next time. And I'll say, yeah, maybe next time. So disrespect can also occur when friends monopolize each other's time. Everyone can have other friends. You don't just have to have one friend. And so you shouldn't be alarmed when, if you want to do something with your friend and you say, hey, how about going over here? And they say, well, I'm going with someone else over here today. And, for you to get jealous and start thinking, well, why didn't they ask me to go? Those jerks. That's not the right thing. That's disrespectful. You haven't grown yet. You need to grow past that point of thinking others need to do everything your way. If you want to throw a fit, start screaming and everything to get somebody to do it your way, no, that's not right. Even if you think what you're talking about is right, it's not right. All right. Now, when that situation occurs where there is some moral situation taking place and a person is fixing to make a wrong choice, you can do everything in your power to try to keep that person from making that choice, short of, physical abuse to them. They've got to, that's the thing, they have to make the choice. You can try to talk them out of doing that harmful thing, but the person has to make the choice, and that's the thing. We're free moral agents. And the Peaceful Solution does teach this. All right, and so also you might put down your notes, page 70 in the character unit, page 70, and that's just where you go back and look at. And then the next bullet point is bullying is a form of disrespect that's best handled by not retaliating, by getting away from the person as quickly as possible and seeking help from those in authority. I can keep my self-respect and avoid a confrontation. Let's turn over to page 134, and I'm probably on over to about page 136. So, I can't remember everything that Chris had on the chart. That he had a slide that was like an updated chart. We used to have a lot of statistics available on bullying and how bad it was in schools. And over the years, the past 20 years, the Peaceful Solution or so, it's kind of grown. So it's a lot worse than what it used to be. But if you look at page 134 where it says bullies, well, look at the top. It says most acts of bullying begin with verbal disrespect and progress to physical disrespect. So although bullying can take place in families between older and younger siblings, the type of bully that we will focus on here is the school bully. And he really focused a lot on that. He had some slides that showed some of the people that were involved in some of the school shootings, some before and after, when they were young, when they were older, and so forth. That kind of stood out in my mind. But these things were ingrained in most of our minds, these things, because they hit the mainstream media, and it was just unheard of back then that these things were taking place. Now it's such an everyday thing, you don't even hear about all of them, But bullies, they're habitually cruel and often take pleasure in seeing others in distress. So they're doing it on purpose. Bullying can take the form of verbal abuse, physical abuse, stealing, and destruction of property. And if you're ever in a situation where someone is verbally abusing you, the first thing you should do is maintain your self-control and don't respond with anger. As with all other acts of disrespect, responding with anger will only make the situation worse. So you got to stop, think, and recognize that verbal abuse is the first step to bullying. And remember, practicing self-control right there. Stop, think, consider your options, and proceed with the right choice. Remember the STOP acronym. I probably won't let you forget that, and neither will the other teachers. That's a huge thing that if you can remember it, that stop sign comes up in your mind, you stop and you start thinking about what you're doing. That's a huge, huge deal. All right. Anyway, at the very bottom it says, don't pretend that it's no big deal that someone is verbally abusing you. It is a big deal. And the likelihood is that the abuse will get worse and even could lead to physical abuse. So, many victims of bullies report they were punched, slapped, kicked, and shoved daily. And I remember that too when I was in school. That occurred to me, and then I did it to others too. So, turn over to page 136. You have an example there. In fact, this is one of the pictures that Chris showed. It was a picture of Barry, I probably will pronounce it wrong too, but Lucius. Anyway, a junior high student in Moses Lake, Washington, and he walked into his room carrying a high-powered rifle and pulled the trigger, and he shot several people, killed some. So anyway, that's and supposedly bullying led him to do this. Now, this is never the right way to take care of the situation. It's never the right way to take care of bullying by bullying in return or fighting back with some type of violence. It's never the way to do it. But some people haven't been taught the peaceful solution, and they make the wrong decision. And of course, all the things, all the influences in their life. In fact, William mentioned, I think in the last class, about the word influere. It's a Latin word, old Latin word. That's where the word influence comes from, and it means to flow into. So this young man had all kinds of influences flowing into him outside of school, at school. The bullying itself was an influence, was a negative influence in his dealing with things, the way that he dealt with them. So we have to remember about all those things that can flow into us on a daily basis. Just think about how a radio works. Our mind is so powerful, we don't even know the extent of everything it can do. We know that if a dog whistle, when you blow it, you can't hear it, right? Oh, there might be someone raise their hand and say, oh yeah, I can. But if most people cannot hear a dog whistle, all they know is they can hear a little bit of air, right? But to the dog, it's very loud. But yet, if I'm standing next to you and you're blowing that dog whistle, the dog hears it. It's obviously going through my ears and in my head somewhere. It's just that it's being filtered out somehow, right? So think about the radio. The radio, there's hundreds of channels right now. If you you don't even have to step outside. You can tune a radio in right here and get probably hundreds of channels. And it's picking up the different songs and statements and political address and everything that's going on. But obviously, it's coming through the airwaves, and so your mind is electrical. It's probably dealing with these things somehow. It's probably filtering them out so that you can deal with people on a normal basis instead of walking around and you got all these different things coming out of your mouth as you're repeating them as the radio waves are coming in. Just a thought. Just think about it. So that's the things that are flowing into you. Now, there are some people that claim to actually hear some of these things and picking it up much like a radio would pick it up. And they don't know how to deal with it because they're hearing these things going on, and they describe it as hearing voices. Maybe some people are hearing voices. Maybe this is part of what some of that is. I don't know, and I don't think science knows all about it either. I think they know a lot about it. But about the things that flow into us, you gotta guard against these things, guard against the negative influences. So I don't know how you'd guard against the radio waves, but anyway, the next bullet point, making sexual comments or jokes is disrespectful. We can go on over to page 140 there. And there's a whole section there you can read on it. And page 141, it gives some tips for girls on doing some certain things to help avoid the situation, and also boys too. But responding to disrespect from the opposite sex. And it talks about how disrespect can occur with people you might or might not know. And even though there's many forms of disrespect, the one that's being focused on in this particular lesson involves how to respond appropriately to disrespect from the opposite sex. And this is prevalent also, not just at schools, not just at the workplace. Oh man, is it present at the workplace or what? I mean, we always heard about it in the past, and we've probably seen examples of it, but now it's a serious thing. Once it hits the mainstream news, you start hearing about it all the time. Man, it just grows and grows. And you got to be very careful how you talk to people. I can assure you this, if you talk to people based upon the peaceful solution, keeping your vocabulary in check with the peaceful solution, keeping your positive moral attitude in check with the peaceful solution, and having respect for everybody, true care and concern, you're not going to say anything that's considered any kind of sexual innuendo or something like that to somebody where you're going to get in any kind of trouble. It's probably not going to occur. Someone might falsely accuse you. That's a whole other story. But in this particular lesson, it talks about where this came from, some of the things that drive it, some of the ways to handle it if someone says something to you that's disrespectful in this manner, and how to stay away from it. Okay, so you can read it for yourself. It covers a lot of ground there, and it's not the only peaceful solution book that covers any part of it. The next bullet point is when I'm disrespectful to others, I must learn to accept being corrected. When I'm disrespectful to others, I must learn to accept being corrected. And turn over to page 143, and this is the page right before us here. So it's when the shoe is on the other foot. Okay, so we're talking about people disrespecting us and so forth, but you know what? What about when the shoe is on the other foot? So the primary focus of this chapter has been to teach you how to respond to someone who's showing you disrespect. But what if the shoe's on the other foot and you're the one who has, unintentionally of course, I mean, surely, those of us that are learning the peaceful solution and practicing it are not going to intentionally show any disrespect to someone, right? So what if you're the one who has unintentionally shown disrespect to someone else? Keep in mind that just as you've been taught how to appropriately handle disrespect from others, likewise you should know how to stop the practice whenever it's brought to your attention. And also, if you're the one being disrespected, remember that, hey, the person might not even know they're doing it. You got to keep that in mind. You know, where'd they come from? How did they grow up? What's going on in their life? What kind of day are they having? You know, all these things. And what are you bringing forth? What are you adding to it that might push this along? We just have to keep in mind, you know, what's going on with the other person. Be empathetic. Walk a mile in their shoes, so to speak. You know. So here's a few tips to help you respond respectfully when you're being corrected. When I'm being corrected. Be patient. Keep in mind, not everyone has been trained to be respectful. Most people respond to even the smallest incident of disrespect by becoming angry and losing their self-control. Try not to become offended and retaliate. Once again, two wrongs don't make a right. Remain calm and respectful. You know, speaking in a calm voice will help the other person bring their tone down. Listen attentively. Try to understand how the person feels. Remember, you have to have someone talking, someone listening, someone giving, someone taking, you know, sharing going on. And then be humble and apologize. It's okay to admit that you were wrong and to apologize. Even if you don't think you showed disrespect, humble yourself and apologize anyway if the other person thinks that you disrespected them. Apologizing shows that you care about how that person feels. And then maybe you could talk about it later when things cool down. Then make every effort to be respectful and not to repeat the same behavior. So we appreciate everybody coming tonight. I'd like you to remember the 4 types of disrespect: real, imagined, and, you know, for the real disrespect, you've got intentional and unintentional. So you got 4 different types: real and imagined, The imagine comes quite often when jumping to a conclusion, and so forth. And then whether it's intentional or unintentional is something that we should be able to discern over a period of time. Keep practicing the peaceful solution, because by practicing it, our muscle memory builds, and we can do the right thing the first time out of the chute, okay? So I'd like to invite you back, everyone, on the next class will be 7/26 at 5:30 p.m. this Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. on 7/26. And so we look forward to everybody being here. And that'll be for those of you online also. We look forward to you being here too. Thank you for coming.